All-American at Miami of Florida. At 6'7", 215 pounds, the pros really weren't sure where to play him, but he ended up as a linebacker, a great linebacker. He was allowed to freelance on defense, blitz when he felt like it. He created havoc for the opposing offenses. He was selected to play in the Pro Bowl 8 times, durable, playing in 215 straight regular season games. Here is Ted Hendricks. Al Davis. Al Davis, who is the president and general partner of the Raiders in 1975, signed a free agent linebacker, Ted Hendricks, who starred for the Raiders for 9 seasons. Today, Al is here to make his 8th presentation, this time for Ted Hendricks. Welcome, Al Davis.
It's always, now calm down up there, because I told you a while ago that we'll move this Hall of Fame to the West Coast. And if you carry on, we might have to move Pittsburgh to the West Coast. It's always great to be with an audience that loves you, respects you, and like the Pittsburgh Steelers fans, are scared to death of you. The Raiders, and I know this is self-serving, the Raiders have just finished 3 decades of football. The 60s, the 70s, and 80s, and the Raiders in those 3 decades have the best records in all of professional sports. Only the Raiders played in the Super Bowls in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And Ted Hendricks, the great Ted Hendricks, was one of 3 Raiders, along with the legendary Hall of Famers Gene Upshaw and Art Shell, who played in all 3 decades. An unbelievable continuity of excellence for 15 years. Ted Hendricks had every endowment, every physical one, of the premier linebacker. He could attack the pocket with the greatest of them all, except maybe one, but he could play space with devastating efficiency, intercepting passes anywhere on the field. He was near impossible to block at the point of attack. He was one of the first who could actually dictate to the offense. And on 4th down, he could block punts and field goals and extra points like no other player in the history of the game. He was the consummate linebacker, more complete, more all around than anyone else who ever played this great game. His records, as well as his play, proved it, and this 6'7" giant was guided by a killer mentality. I'd like to come back to Ted in a moment. I'd like to tell you that it's a great inspiration to come here again today, 8 times, but it's our field of dreams every year, a field of dreams on which our legendary heroes are always available for instant recall, to set the echoes ringing, bring down the thunder from the sky, and inspire us to dream together and work together for the glory of our game. I've said this before, to come here to this hall, walk through its exhibits, to pay tribute to the old-timers who sit behind me and those who are out in the audience, to this class whom we honor here today and in whose glory we all share, and then the marvelous group of today's presenters, who by themselves stand for honor, courage, loyalty, and character. The Raiders, with all their great tradition, with all their mystique, can never forget Hank Stram and the Kansas City Chiefs, the Big Red, Don Shula and his great Miami Dolphins of the 70s, the legendary battles with Chuck Noll and the Pittsburgh Steelers, Tom Landry and the great Cowboy teams. There's a continuing realization that we all owe them a debt. We all owe each other a debt. And I, for one, and the Raiders, wherever we are, will never forget that debt. I want to say that all of us, including the great fans who participate and partake in the vicious struggle to be number one, and who ride on the roller coaster called professional football, dream a lot and trust a lot in the muses of fate and destiny. We believe that if we live right, work hard, we can dominate, and we may be blessed with miraculous good fortune. It has happened to the Raider organization more than a few times. In fact, I'm here today in Canton because of a miracle named Ted Hendricks that happened to us 15 years ago. He did not come to us in the embryonic stage, but we are convinced that he was always destined to be a Raider. His karma and the fixation of the Raiders in time and place made the matching inevitable. But it was another quality, uniquely American specialness, that enabled Ted to bridge the gap between star and legends. The historians call that mantle individualism, and its wearer is often termed maverick. Ted Hendricks, if there ever was one, was a maverick. A maverick is a person who will defy custom, stand up for principle, and have the courage to do things his way. As a spokesman for the Raider organization and its great players, its great fans, its great office people, I would like to express our gratitude for the many ways in which this magnificent athlete contributed to our success. Thank you, Ted, for having a charismatic presence in every game you played. You were the epitome of just win, baby, just win. Thank you, Ted, for having such an awesome tolerance for pain and none at all for defeat. It took indestructibility to do what this guy did, but he played in 215 consecutive league games, the most ever played by a linebacker in the history of the National Football League. Thank you, Ted, for your commitment to excellence and the will to win you provided as a defensive team captain. Thanks for being such a winning force in every one of the 4 Super Bowls that you played, 3 with the Raiders, and his teams won all 4. And lastly, Ted, from all of us, exemplifying the great Raider spirit and individuality, for carrying that silver and black insignia so proudly and distinctly on your uniform and in your heart. We'll always wish you Godspeed. As you go into the Hall of Fame, we advise you to bring your silver and black helmet with you. There are 6 legends named Shell, Upshaw, Otto, Brown, Biletnikoff, and Blanda, who have been waiting patiently for a linebacker, and we could do no less than to send in the very best they're in. I want you to think of all the great stadiums, Pittsburgh, Miami, Kansas City, Dallas, and as the crowd roar in my dream stadium becomes thunderous, I can hear the PA announcer saying, from Hialeah, Florida, where he was a high school All-American, from the University of Miami, where he was a college All-American, from the Baltimore Colts, the Green Bay Packers, the Oakland, and now Los Angeles, where he was All-Pro with every team. number 83, in his finest hour, the indestructible Hall of Famer, Ted Hendricks.
Well, I had a short speech planned because I have my Miami Springs my hometown has a party planned for me, and I think I'm going to be late. But I'm not going to let the Pittsburgh Steelers take anything away from me. First of all, I'd like to say that my father can't make it here today, but my father played high school football against Tom Landry. Landry went to Mission High School. My father was from McAllen High School in Texas. Getting on with that, I'm not going to mention my whole family, but I thank them an awful lot for what they've done for me, my friends, my fellow teammates, and my coaches, and one owner of the organization of the Raiders. Now, for Commissioner Tagliabue, I'm not that familiar with you, but I'm very familiar with King Roselle. And I hope he gets the message here, because we've had some great times with him and his office when I came to the Raiders. Now to get on to all the teams that I've played for, there's 4 of them when you think about the different cities, okay? One team takes on 2 cities, okay? I felt like I didn't have a home anywhere because the Baltimore Colts are now the Indianapolis Colts. And the first team that I played for, the Baltimore Colts, Don Shula was the coach, and he drafted me. I finally made the team then in the old NFL, and as the merger came about, Don left me. We won the Super Bowl the following year, that year that he left, and that was my first Super Bowl appearance, a second-year man in the National Football League. And here I'm playing with the greats on the Baltimore Colt team that had lost the Super Bowl game to the Jets and had championship games in 58 and 59. All that team was still there. And here I am, a rookie amongst all these stars, and I'm not going to go through all the names because I'm going to keep this a little short because I have a little more to say than I planned to. Anyway, Don Shula, my 3rd year in the league, kept me away from having another Super Bowl ring by beating us down in Miami 21-0. Upon that, the following year, the Baltimore Colts were actually decimated, and a new ownership took over. My team left, and I was left behind. My 2 years there, I was very unhappy. And I was happy that the Baltimore Colts at that time, which are the Indianapolis Colts, same ownership, sent me to Green Bay. Because in Green Bay, I had one of my finest years ever. And that was in the NFC conference. Well, lo and behold, I became a free agent. And I had to talk to Commissioner Tagliabue's office to get his advice on what the legalities were. I offered my services, first all back to the Green Bay Packers, then to the Miami Dolphins, then to the Atlanta Falcons, and the only one that could sign me was Al Davis from the Raiders. He had to make some concessions, but they weren't that big. Anyway, on my first year with the Raiders, I pulled a hamstring muscle. Not a hamstring, a groin muscle, excuse me, a little different. Anyway, what happened was that during that year, since I couldn't start the first game, although I did play on the specialty teams, I sat the bench after making 4 consecutive All-Pros. It was a very frustrating year for me, and I believe we played Pittsburgh that year, and they won the game. But the following year, we were the Super Bowl champs. And to mention all the Raider players, I'd take up too much time. You know the Hall of Famers, as Al mentioned. As my career went on, I finally got a starting job with the Raiders. I played a right linebacker. Then they switched me over to left linebacker. I finally made All-Pro again in my later years. And I recall a Monday night game against Pittsburgh. And Bradshaw was so courteous to me, he threw me 2 interceptions in that game, and we beat them in their hometown. Now, the Raiders love to come into a town such as Cleveland in one of our playoff games with 80,000 people booing us. We just love that. Well, I've never heard 80,000 people go silent on one play. And we intercepted the ball in the end zone, and we went on to win our Super Bowl again. To name the rivalries of the Raiders, the Miami Dolphins, first of all, the Kansas City Chiefs, but I'd gotten to the Raiders after that rivalry was concerned. Naturally, the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've always had a rivalry with our interconference games. Seattle Seahawks always gave us a problem. San Diego Chargers, Denver Broncos. Cleveland doesn't like us at all. New York Jets gave us a time, but they're still afraid of us. It seems like everybody is actually afraid to play us. And no, not afraid. It's just a rivalry we have between you. I have to mention a congratulatory note to my fellow enshrinees, and more than that, to the the Hall of Famers that are already enshrined. And to go back through the history, this is the cream of the crop, and they show exactly what dignity and humanity and greatness is all about. Get a little tongue-tied here. In closing, I'd like to say that the fans are the greatest part of football. And you give us the courage to go on and play to a point of excellence, and our desire to excellence. And as a matter of fact, our motto is a commitment to excellence. And I told Al one time that I should have been committed a long time ago. Thank you.